So for you, a good place to really get started would be, I know this is a premium training session, but if you want to just get a feel for what our system is actually recording in terms of who your sales staff are, you can go to the sales area of your retailer Pulse platform and click on sales staff. This is what we suggest you kind of go to initially to understand how many people are actually staffed and who's considered a bud tender within the headset platform. So sales staff, if we just take a look at this module here, we see that we have our sales stats. You can see who is performing at your store. I would probably break this down into a store level. So the store you can select, if you have your Portland store, your Bend store, whichever one you want to look at, but I would definitely do it on a store by store basis, just so you can understand, unless you have bud tenders that are kind of like maneuvering through each one of those locations, which I assume you likely don't, but if I just select our Bothell location here, this is our dummy stores, so dummy data. There's only 3 bud tenders that we have on staff within the last 30 days, but you can get a feel for how each person is functioning within that store. If you hover over the little bubble, you can get a feel for what their average basket is like, total units and basket count, and see who's kind of like the outlier here. And then if you scroll down, this is really the main thing I wanted to mention about the sales staff was that you can see who's considered a bud tender within the headset application by looking at this table. So you have your list of employees here, and then you have your bud tender status. So if it says no, that they're not going to be considered a bud tender, this is just like if it's an owner who's not actually is part of the sales staff, or someone like that at your store who's not making those transactions, they should be probably set to no. Otherwise, if they do like some one-off random transaction for themselves, it might skew the data a little bit. So those are set to no. And then anyone that has a yes next to their name, those are being recorded as or recognized as bud tenders within our application. So just want to pay attention to that. If you see something that might be off, someone that should be considered a bud tender that's not, you can go ahead and click the 3 dots next to their name and click update bud tender status. And then you'll be able to adjust their bud tender status here. So you can change it to a yes if they need to be. Why that is important is because within our employee management module over here on the left under premium employee management, anything that's indicated as yes is going to filter into these modules and track their employee performance. So John, the one thing I would mention for you to get started, this is what we went over on Tuesday, is the staffing store. So staffing store is going to be all about how well your store is staffed. If you can get, like I said, mentioned earlier, if you can get away with maybe having 1 less sales staff on the floor on Mondays around 9 a.m. or something like that, this dashboard is really going to tell you that information. So if I just do a quick refresh here, it will filter in and show you, my date range is a little funky, but I'm not going to adjust that right now. It'll tell you how many average employees you have each day of the week. It will give you some information for the next coming week. So this is going to be information from last year, next week. So you can use this as like a benchmark or understanding what you did last year. And then you can understand some heat map related information. So metrics per employee. And again, I go into a lot more of this detail in that recording that I told you about, but I just wanted to point out kind of where to find this type of information if you want to take a deep dive. So you can see if they're above or below average in terms of average transaction, and if it's kind of like overworking them or underworking them. That's kind of where I mentioned if you can get away with 1 less bud tender and increase your revenue, then that's all good. So I just wanted to point that out for you in terms of staffing store, what we can expect to see there.
Okay, that's perfect. Hey, one quick question then. So if I'm just, yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So if basically, if they do a transaction, they count as an employee for that day or that time period. Unless they're said, then it's a bud tender no, and then they don't count. Is that kind of, that's how you grab the employee counts?
Yeah, correct.
Yep. Okay, got it. Perfect.
Yep. All righty. So moving on to team performance. This is the next dashboard in line for employee management module. So we have team performance here. Again, we're going to select our store. I'm sticking with my Denver location. You can narrow it down by employee if you would like to. If you're kind of like keeping a watch on specific employees there. And then metric select, so you can kind of view them by a couple of different metrics here. So total revenue, basket count, or gross margin. I'm going to stick with total revenue because I'm curious in terms of revenue, what my bud tenders are bringing in for me and how they're performing that way. But what I do want to also look at is I want to summarize my information by brand because maybe in this scenario, I'm interested in if my bud tenders have a certain preference or affinity towards brands. And I can see, you know, which brands are not performing as well in terms of employee sales. And maybe there's an employee that just like doesn't know that much about a brand or a product underneath that brand line. And we can kind of aim to do a little bit more education and things like that for their bud tenders. John, I'm curious how does your bud tender education work? Are you bringing in vendors to do education for them, or how does that work on your end?
There's a program called Learn Brands that we're using.
Okay.
And then we also, yeah, and then also vendors do come in as well.
Okay, cool. Great to know. I don't know a ton about how brand education works, so I'm just curious for my own education, how they get up to speed on different brands and products.
Yeah, no, Learn Brands is pretty good because it has a good overview of, you know, cannabis in general, but then also then companies that are able to upload their own training too. So you can sort of like do a deep dive down into a specific company as well.
Okay. And do you think are all the brands that you carry at your stores accounted for in Learn Brand, or are there some missing?
Some of the larger ones, most of the larger ones are.
Okay.
But not all of them. But yeah, so I mean, we kind of require some base level training for all of our employees at the start.
Okay. I'm curious if there's any sort of correlation between those brands are on Learn Brand and the employees that learn about them versus the ones that might not be, if your employees are selling more of the Learn Brand ones than the other ones.
Yeah,
that's
very good question. But
yeah, something that you could probably definitely track within this team performance area. Okay, thanks for that info.
Yep.
So again, summarizing by product, but you could also do category or vendor. And then sold date, I'm just going to look at the last complete month. And I want to track edibles specifically just because that's what I felt like looking at today, but you could just look at overall categories and then track by brand. And then of course you can filter down into brands, vendors, package size, and even product name in this one, which is kind of cool. You can get down to pretty detailed information here. And then the is bud tender, yes, no. Again, I went over this on Tuesday, but this is just meaning that you want to look at those bud tenders that are indicated as yes within that staffing store. And then you can also select no if you ever want to look at, for some reason, those who are not bud tenders. Not sure what a use case would be for that, but it is a possibility. So bud tender makeup of sales down here. This is going to show you, it's kind of a lot of colors and craziness right here, but it's breaking out by each brand. And you also have your bud tender name at this store. And you can clearly see which brands they've been selling more of. And you can also click off any of these that are kind of muddying the waters here. So I see NA. You know, you can click off any of these other ones also to make the graphs a little less crazy. And you can see by percentage how much revenue is going towards each of these brands here. So it looks like Saris is one of a really popular brand at this store, and everyone is kind of selling quite a bit of it in terms of revenue, but there might be ones that people are selling a little bit more of than others. For example, Bob looks like he's selling more of Wild than anyone else by 5% more. Looks like Psy is selling more Pioneer Squares. So you can kind of hover over each of these and get a breakdown of who's kind of selling what. The next graph, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. The next graph is just a brand and total revenue. So again, you're breaking out by brands. You're looking at each of your employees here. You can also click off any of your employees that you don't want to see. So what I want to do here is I see that these reds are kind of like higher than some of the other ones. Same with the purple. So I want to find who my purple and reds are because they're selling quite a bit of everything, maybe doing a little bit better than other people, other sales staff at the store. And I see that that's Scott and Seth. I can hover over each of these dots and see, again, similar information to this, but just showing the revenue information in these little dots here. So I can see how they're doing with each of the brands in terms of revenue. Really personal preference on how you like to view the information, whether it's by this little bubble chart or this makeup of sales. And then scrolling down, we can see bud tenders and discounting across selected products. So this is going to give you an idea of, okay, maybe Seth and Scott are doing really well, but are they also kind of high with their discounts, or are they like along the average range of discounts? I see that Seth is getting pretty up there with his discounts, up to 50% off a given product or a given brand, whereas Scott is doing a little bit less discounting, but he's still performing pretty well. So that's just something to keep in mind when you do look at this information. Keep in mind that maybe they are discounting and that is what's pushing them a little bit higher into the sales bracket. They might be giving off more discounts, therefore people are buying a little bit more, something like that. So this is a good way to track that type of information. Again, this is by brand. I do want to show what it would look like by category though, just to get an idea of a little bit less crazy of a graph here. If it will load quickly. So this is a little bit easier to read just because there's less categories than there are brands. And you can see, you know, here, if there's a certain employee that knows a little bit more about a certain category than the others, you could maybe quickly identify that within here. Or maybe they're highly discounting a certain category, or all of your sales staff is highly discounting a certain category. That might give an idea to what the pricing is like for that category, and they might not be able to sell it as well unless they discount it. So that's another thing that you could use this for. And down at the bottom, percent of baskets with information completed by employee. So John, I don't know if you can tell me, are you collecting demographic type information from your customers through a loyalty program like gender, age, referral source?
Not, I mean, we are collecting it, but we aren't really using it. And it's more just for our loyalty program.
Okay, sounds good.
And it's only for customers who agree for it to be used. So it's a
Right.
subset of our customers.
Okay, good to know. So if that is an important piece of information for your store, you know, tracking referral sources, tracking and segmenting customers based on age and gender and things like that, then this is where you could look to see if who's really gathering that information and if they're doing a good job of it or not. So this is where you can see baskets with age, gender, and which sales staff is collecting that info. So if we zoom in a little bit here, we can see Sky, 80% of his baskets have, what is that? Age, 30, almost 38% of his baskets have gender. Oh, 24% of his baskets have age, and this is the referral source. 80% has referral source. So that's just something to keep in mind too. If all of your age buckets are kind of lower, maybe incentivize them to increase their grabs on that type of information if your market allows that. But otherwise, that's kind of where you would go to get that information on who's collecting info or not. Any questions on team performance here?
No, not at the moment.
Okay. And then we have a leaderboard dashboard, which is kind of fun. So employee management, it's going to be under the team performance for leaderboard dashboard. This is where you can go if you do want to, again, maybe benchmark on your employees, like who's performing the best currently. And then you could also use this to have competitions internally with your sales staff if that is something that you want to allow them to do. For example, maybe you have a competition on who can sell the most edibles under the Wild brand. Then this is where you could go to kind of benchmark and then track their performance and run a first place, second place, third place type competition. So with this, again, the filters are going to look really similar. I am filtering out by edibles, and I'm looking at the last complete month. Again, I'm tracking by revenue as well. And then we can see in terms of the last complete month, who is selling the most edibles in terms of units. We see Scott is selling the most edibles. Second place is Seth. Third place is Cy. And then down here, we have the stats of each employee. A little tool tip, if you don't know yet, is that we can download all of this data. So even with these charts back here, if they're kind of hard to read, you can download them into a nice data format within Excel or a CSV, and you can analyze that data that way. And you can simply click as displayed in the data table and then download it from there. Again, it's the tile actions, the 3 dots on the right. So that's something you could do with these stats too if you want to look at it outside of the application. Just download it. But this will give you an idea for what total revenue is associated with each of these employees, total profit, percent of discounts they gave, how many units that equated to, and what their basket count was. So you can really track all sorts of different metrics using this all the stats table and kind of track what's important to you there. I did say that this was units, but it's actually revenue. So $4,736. So that's a little bit about the leaderboard dashboard. Kind of a fun thing if you do ever implement. John, do you think this is something you would kind of think about implementing as like a little competition, or is that something that's like not cool?
Is there a way that you can track it for certain products or certain brands?
Yeah, so you can filter this brand by whatever brands are in your list here.
We do have contests from time to time, or for a specific brand or product. So yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and you can filter product here as well.
Cool.
Nice. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is discount utilization. This can give you an understanding of, maybe your employees are using discounts appropriately, or maybe they're using them not appropriately. This is a question we get asked a lot. I think I saw AJ on the phone too. I'm sure he can attest to that. We get asked about discount abusing, I guess, quite frequently. And is there a way to see that in this application? So this is kind of where you can go to analyze discount utilization. One thing we can do is either summarize by discount name or discount bucket. Discount name is going to be great for if you have a discount name associated with whatever discount you're giving out. Something to keep in mind is that if this isn't tracked consistently in your point of sale, then it might not be super accurate. So if you have a discount name associated, for example, like employee discount 20% off or something, and every time they're making a transaction, they're using that discount name, then that would be great to use this discount name summarized by. Otherwise, discount bucket is going to be your buckets of discounts. So either 10 to 20% off, 20 to 30, what have you. We're just bucketing in a numerical format what your discounts are. And then you can also narrow down by employee. This is where you would add the discount name if you wanted to check out a discount. And then is bud tender. And then if you do choose discount name, you would want to choose has discount name here. We can choose no for this since we're just doing discount bucket. Then we can look at transaction count versus discounted amount. So something to keep in mind with this particular graph is it should be kind of a linear progression. Employees who are selling more will likely have a higher amount of discounts versus employees who are selling less would have likely a lower. However, this is where you can kind of identify any outliers that might be using discounts more than they should be potentially. So if we were to draw just like a line going up, we can identify maybe like 1 or 2 outliers that might not fit into that line exactly. It looks like these guys here aren't really outliers, but if we had like someone way up here, I should mention that the total transactions are at the bottom and then the total discounted amount. So in dollars, how much they have given away essentially because of their discount that they applied. So if we had someone up here that had 760 transactions, but has given away about 11,000 in discounts, that would be something we would definitely want to look at because it wouldn't necessarily fit within our average line. So that's kind of how we can look at this transaction count versus discounted amount. And then if we scroll down, we can look at discounts by employees. So we can see, which discount buckets are made up of which employees. So if you see kind of a larger number or a larger colored line, like, I don't know, everyone's kind of average here, but Snoop Dogg has the largest amount of 60 to 70% off discounts, as opposed to the rest of the group who only have, it looks like 1 transaction under that, but Snoop has 2. So that's kind of an outlier there. Greater than 100%. Don't know what Brian is doing. He got something for free. Hopefully that was cool and approved, but if not, maybe talk to him. And it looks like Brian also has the highest amount of 0 to 10% discount. So just another way to kind of take a deep dive into this discount landscape. And then finally, we have a discounting transaction and percent of employees total transaction. This is a lot of information here, but it's really just kind of giving information about kind of like indexes as to the number of discounts people are giving. I'm not necessarily going to go too much into this just because it's a lot of numbers and percentages, but if you're kind of analytical and like that index type of format, I would definitely suggest taking a deep dive into this one. That is all I have in terms of kind of understanding employee management a little bit more. There are a couple of other different, I think I didn't go into the leaderboard email, but that's essentially if you want to schedule an email for a leaderboard, then that's where you could go to do that. And then the last thing I wanted to mention on this topic is we do have an industry report called the revolving door factor. It looks at how bud tender turnover looks in the cannabis industry. As you could imagine, it's quite high. So we talk about, how the turnover affects cannabis retailers' growth and the stats of the percentage of employee turnover and possibly how we can improve on the retention rates. So that's a little bit about this revolving door. Happy to send that to you as well after this if you want to give it a read. It's pretty interesting stuff.